In 2024, CVS filled 66.4 million more prescriptions than it had the year before. Its pharmacy and consumer wellness segment collected roughly $7.7 billion more in revenue. Adjusted operating income still fell by $189 million. More medicine left the counter. More money passed through the business. Less profit remained when the year was over. That is the trap inside American pharmacy. From the waiting area, a busy pharmacy looks healthy. Phones ring. Labels print. Technicians move from screen to shelf. A line forms at pickup. Every completed prescription appears to be another sale. But a pharmacy is not an ordinary retailer. It usually does not buy a product, choose a comfortable markup, and place that price on the shelf. It buys the drug. It holds the inventory. It employs the licensed staff. It verifies the prescription, checks for dangerous interactions, processes the insurance claim, and accepts the professional risk of dispensing the medication correctly. Yet the amount paid for all of that may be determined by a contract the pharmacy had little power to shape. When that payment falls below the cost of the drug, or leaves too little to cover the work around it, the next prescription does not rescue the business. It makes the counter busier, while the economics underneath it get worse. The bottle is filled inside the pharmacy. The price that decides whether the pharmacy survives is often set somewhere else. To the customer, the transaction appears simple. A doctor sends a prescription. The pharmacy prepares it. The patient pays a copay, takes a paper bag, and leaves. If the copay is $10, it is easy to assume the pharmacy sold the medication for $10. That is not what happened. The patient's payment may be only one part of the transaction. Another payment may come through the health plan. Between the insurer and the pharmacy is often a pharmacy benefit manager, or PBM. PBMs administer prescription benefits for insurers, employers, government programs, and other plan sponsors. They process claims, build pharmacy networks, negotiate with drug manufacturers, influence which drugs are covered, and help determine what patients and pharmacies pay. Those functions can reduce costs and encourage the use of generics or lower-priced alternatives. The problem is not that a middle layer exists. The problem is what happens when that layer has enough bargaining power to shape both access to patients and the payment attached to each prescription. By the time a patient reaches the counter, the pharmacy has already agreed to a network contract. That contract may define the reimbursement formula, dispensing payment, performance adjustments, and other terms surrounding the claim. The pharmacist can decide whether the prescription is clinically safe. The pharmacist usually cannot decide what the prescription is worth. Follow one simplified claim. The pharmacy buys a month's supply of a drug from a wholesaler for $100. The patient pays a $15 copay. The insurance arrangement contributes another $87. The pharmacy receives $102. More than $100 of revenue appears on the transaction. Only $2 remains after the drug itself is paid for, and that $2 is not profit. The pharmacy still has to pay the pharmacist and technician. It has rent, software, electricity, insurance, licensing, security, compliance, inventory losses, and the cost of maintaining a system that must be accurate every time. Now reduce the total payment from $102 to $98. The patient still needs the medication. The pharmacy still paid $100 for it. The staff still has to process and dispense it safely. But the business has now lost $2 before paying for the labor that completed the prescription. One claim will not close a pharmacy. Thousands of claims with the same economics can. This is where the familiar retail logic breaks. Imagine Pharmacy A fills 1,000 prescriptions. After paying for the medication and direct claim costs, it retains an average of $3 from each fill. That leaves $3,000 to help cover payroll, rent, utilities, and the rest of the operation. Pharmacy B fills 1,300 prescriptions but loses an average of $1 on each one. Pharmacy B looks more successful. Its shelves turn faster. Its claim count rises. Its employees complete 300 additional prescriptions. Its reported revenue may be much higher. Yet the volume produces a $1,300 loss before the pharmacy pays the fixed cost of opening its doors. Revenue measures how much money passed through the counter. Contribution measures how much stayed behind to support the business. That difference turns prescription count into a dangerous vanity metric. A pharmacy can survive a quieter day with strong reimbursement more easily than a packed day dominated by weak contracts. The critical question is not how many bottles left the building. It is what remained after each bottle did. That distinction becomes more important as the PBM market becomes more concentrated. A 2024 Federal Trade Commission interim staff report said the three largest PBMs processed nearly 80% of roughly 6.6 billion prescriptions dispensed by American pharmacies in 2023. The six largest processed more than 90%. The PBM industry disputes major parts of the FTC's criticism and argues that its negotiations reduce drug spending for health plans and patients. The FTC's report was also interim, not the final word on every practice it examined. But the concentration itself creates a hard business reality. There is another complication. The largest PBMs are not always independent referees standing between insurers and pharmacies. Several sit inside larger healthcare companies that may also own an insurer, a mail-order operation, a specialty pharmacy, or retail pharmacies of their own. That vertical integration does not prove that every reimbursement decision is abusive. It does mean the company designing the network can have financial interests on more than one side of it. An unaffiliated pharmacy may therefore be negotiating with a gatekeeper whose corporate family also competes for the same prescription. The argument is no longer only about the size of the payment. It is also about who controls the route the patient is allowed to take, and whether one part of an integrated system can steer economic value toward another. A pharmacy can reject a contract it considers unattractive. It can also lose access to the patients whose insurance uses that network. For a local pharmacy, that may mean choosing between accepting poor reimbursement and watching a large share of its customers disappear. The pharmacy buys the inventory. The pharmacy hires the professionals. The pharmacy faces the patient. The pharmacy carries the dispensing risk. But the party controlling access to the network may have enormous influence over the price. That is not a normal retail relationship. It is closer to a supplier being told what it will receive by the gatekeeper controlling its customers. And scale does not eliminate the problem. Walgreens warns investors that reimbursement pressure from PBMs, government programs, managed care organizations, and other payers affects its pharmacy business. It also warns that a shift toward plans paying lower reimbursement can weaken gross profit. A national chain can negotiate better purchasing terms than an independent store. It still cannot turn every contract into good volume. Expensive drugs make the picture even harder to read. Suppose a pharmacy dispenses a $20 generic medication and retains $4 before labor and overhead. That is a 20% gross spread. Now suppose another prescription involves a $1,000 medication and leaves the pharmacy $10. The second claim creates 50 times more revenue. It leaves only 2.5 times more gross dollars. The percentage spread is just 1%. A small reimbursement change can erase it completely. This is how pharmacy sales can rise dramatically without producing a comparable increase in profit. Walgreens reported that pharmacy sales increased 10.4% in the first quarter of fiscal 2025, while prescriptions filled increased only 1.5% on a 30-day equivalent basis. Higher branded drug inflation was one reason the dollar value of sales rose much faster than the number of prescriptions. The pharmacy appears to be selling more. In reality, more expensive inventory is moving through the same narrow pipe. That creates a cash problem as well as a margin problem. The pharmacy may have to purchase the medication before it receives final reimbursement. As acquisition costs rise, more cash becomes trapped between buying the drug and collecting payment. High revenue can therefore make a pharmacy look larger while leaving it more exposed. Even the way prescription volume is counted can create an illusion. Large chains often report prescriptions in 30-day equivalents. A 90-day supply may count as 3 30-day prescriptions. That is useful for comparing the amount of medication dispensed. It does not mean the pharmacy completed 3 separate transactions or earned 3 times the profit. Walgreens states that its 90-day retail prescriptions typically carry a lower margin than comparable 30-day prescriptions, even though they can improve convenience, adherence, and the cost of filling the medication. The patient receives 3 months of treatment. The company reports 3 30-day equivalents. The economic return per month supplied can still decline. The metric improves. The margin underneath it does not. Medicare Part D added another layer through pharmacy price concessions often associated with direct and indirect remuneration, or DIR. Under the older structure, a pharmacy could receive an initial payment and later face contractually defined concessions or performance adjustments. A claim that appeared profitable at the counter could become less attractive months afterward. Beginning January 1, 2024, CMS required Part D pharmacy price concessions to be reflected in the negotiated price at the point of sale. That moved the pressure forward. It made the lowest possible reimbursement visible earlier. It did not guarantee that the payment would be sufficient. A pharmacy could now see the weak economics immediately and still fear that rejecting the contract would cost access to the network. The uncertainty changed shape. The bargaining problem remained. Now return to CVS. In 2024, its pharmacy and consumer wellness segment filled about 1.715 billion prescriptions on a 30-day equivalent basis. Volume increased 4%, adding 66.4 million prescriptions. Segment revenue rose from about $116.8 billion to $124.5 billion. Adjusted operating income fell from roughly $5.96 billion to $5.77 billion. Those numbers do not prove that the additional prescriptions caused the decline. CVS said increased prescription volume, vaccinations, and improved drug purchasing helped its results. The problem was that those benefits were not large enough to overcome continuing reimbursement pressure and weaker front store volume. That distinction is the entire story. The new prescriptions were useful. They were not valuable enough to protect the profit line. The visible activity moved in the right direction. The surrounding economics moved harder in the other one. Traditional chain pharmacies were never built around prescriptions alone. The pharmacy counter created repeat traffic. A patient picking up medication might also buy shampoo, vitamins, cosmetics, snacks, household supplies, or an over-the-counter treatment. The prescription brought the customer into the building. The front store helped monetize the visit. That system weakens when patients use drive-through windows, receive medication by mail, buy household goods online, or walk directly to the counter and leave. The pharmacy can become more efficient at dispensing medicine while becoming less effective as a retail destination. The patient still arrives. The second transaction disappears. That is why the real profit engine is not the raw prescription count. It is the complete economic package surrounding the patient. That package includes the spread between reimbursement and acquisition cost, the pharmacy's purchasing terms, the prescription mix, vaccinations, clinical services, front store purchases, staffing efficiency, and payment for professional work beyond handing over a bottle. The prescription creates a relationship. The pharmacy survives only when that relationship produces enough value to pay for the drug, the labor, and the infrastructure behind it. A bottle by itself may not carry the store. The health services around the bottle might. The pressure is no longer hidden inside spreadsheets. In October 2024, Walgreens announced a plan to close roughly 1,200 stores over 3 years. Reimbursement was not the only problem. The chain was also dealing with weak retail conditions, property costs, and broader operating challenges. But low reimbursement was part of the burden. Independent pharmacies face the same pressure without the same purchasing scale, capital access, or ability to spread losses across a national network. The FTC's 2024 report noted that about 10% of independent retail pharmacies in rural America closed between 2013 and 2022. When a pharmacy disappears from a major shopping district, another provider may still be nearby. When the only pharmacy in a rural town disappears, the consequence is different. Patients may have to travel farther for medication, vaccinations, advice, and basic services that were once available a few minutes from home. A weak reimbursement formula can begin as a few dollars missing from one claim. Repeated across thousands of claims, it becomes a payroll problem, then a staffing problem, then a store closure problem. Eventually, it becomes a healthcare access problem for people who never saw the contract causing it. That is why healthy pharmacies do not simply chase volume. They need good volume. Good volume covers the medication and the work required to dispense it. It makes a reasonable contribution toward the building. It arrives through predictable contracts. It can be processed without exhausting staff or trapping dangerous amounts of cash in inventory. It may also connect the patient to vaccinations, testing, medication management, or other paid clinical services. Bad volume does the opposite. It carries a high acquisition cost. It pays little above that cost, or less than the cost entirely. It consumes pharmacist and technician time. It comes through a network the pharmacy cannot afford to leave, and it produces no second source of value. Two pharmacies can fill the same number of prescriptions. One is building a durable healthcare business. The other is turning cash, labor, and professional risk into impressive-looking revenue, while almost nothing stays behind. A crowded pharmacy can look successful from the waiting area. The phones keep ringing. The labels keep printing. The pickup line keeps moving. The staff never slows down. But activity is not profitability. A prescription is not valuable merely because a bottle changed hands. It is valuable when the total payment covers the medicine, the licensed work, and the infrastructure required to deliver it safely. That is the hidden fault line inside the pharmacy model. The pharmacy controls the final few feet of the transaction. It may not control the price attached to it. So when a pharmacy closes despite filling thousands of prescriptions, the problem may not be that it sold too little medicine. The problem may be that it sold exactly what the healthcare system asked it to sell, under terms the pharmacy could no longer afford to accept. The bottle is what the patient sees. The contract behind it decides whether the pharmacy survives.